It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
We're back on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett Bain with Freeman Michaels, and that was Mickey Willis before the break. A very lot to chew on from Mickey. There's always a lot to chew on from Mickey, a lot of food for thought there. As I said, Freeman, I've had the pleasure of being up on that property and experiencing firsthand the relational dynamics, the commitment to excellence and to growth and to community and to vision and to mission and to purpose. And it is very inspiring. It is, there's definitely a book there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know,
I'm sure there's a few films there.
There's a lot there, but it is really a model worthy of some very, very deep examination, because there are many, many lessons.
Well, this is it. This is it. Go on, you're doing it.
It reminds me of long division.
Yeah.
You remember long division?
No,
you'd
totally.
have this number, and 23 into 470, and you'd put 23 into 47 goes once, and you put 23 and carry the 5, carry the 2, and you'd work it all out, and you'd have this whole kind of root thing so that you understand the piece. And then once you got really good at division, you could just do it in your head.
And then there was time for trigonometry. There was always the next layer.
Always
or
the next
right?
layer. So Mickey and the way he does relationship, it reminds me of showing your work so you can become a master.
I love
and
that. Show your work.
He has a mastery of so many levels of intimacy, but and at the same time at the cutting edge of cutting the sort of the new crop, planting into his virgin awareness.
Yeah.
There they are showing their long division.
So I heard Mickey talking about this community at the very beginning of it. And it's very interesting to me because, of course, I again, he's a friend of yours. I don't necessarily know Mickey, and so I wanted to research a little. And so I listened to a podcast of him on some show right at the time that they were moving into this place. And it's very interesting because how he said, I thought it was doing one thing, and then I realized it was, far more, we use the word dimensional, right? It has these layers to it. And we even used another expression I think is perfect, dynamic complexity, that it's complex and it's always changing. And one moment I feel like, oh, that's it. And the next moment it's something else, And
your dynamic complexity, to remind any of our listeners, this is language that we talked about for a long time, quite some time ago. So
yeah,
it's nice
we haven't brought up in a while, but yeah.
It is the awareness simultaneously that, to go back to Mickey, he's working on his own process.
Right.
He's working on his process with all of the various aspects of himself.
Right.
He referred to the
Archetypes.
relating to the archetypes. So there are all of those pieces, all of which he's working with individually and collectively. So you got one plate spinning,
Right.
then you got another plate spinning,
Right.
then you got one pin juggling, then
Right.
you got another pin juggling, and this is all happening at the same time.
Right.
Then you're doing the community, then you're doing the family, then you're doing, so each one is working in this highly dynamic and highly complex simultaneous giving of attention.
And what happens for most of us is we initially create, we call it the box, people call it the box, whatever, that we crunch everything down to a kind of way that we want to know or hold things. We try to define our lives. We want to hold it in a particular way. Then everything fits or it doesn't fit, and if it doesn't fit, we marginalize it and get it out of there.
And we
can't
don't
handle
grow.
it. Yeah.
Unless if you're fitting it all into the box,
Exactly.
there's no growth.
But what we're talking about in terms of consciousness, expanding that box where it can hold more and more complexity, where it can hold more and more spinning plates, as you like to say, that this can be true and not true simultaneously. And I love the idea that Mickey's a filmmaker, because storytelling so often is what we call the second story. It's so predictable. It's like, okay, someone has this difficult set of circumstances and they overcome it and everyone wins at the end and you get to celebrate. Versus, I love films that have a slice of life, where there's complexity, where the characters have elements of light and dark, and they're not one-dimensional. And I love that for my own life, because what it does is it gives me permission to have the breadth of my own humanity. I don't have to keep crunching it down. Even the word consciousness is a restriction. Like, I don't want to play that game. Like, I don't even know what this is we do. I like Burnett. We have a great time. We go talk about stuff that's interesting to us. Call it whatever you want. I mean, there's days I fight that. But we'll call it consciousness. That's fine. This idea of expanding to where we can handle more and more complexity. And what's true in one moment might not be true in the next moment. And we can hold it. We have an awareness, a sense of ourselves, and we'll call it consciousness, expanded enough consciousness to go, okay, I can handle that. That's exciting to me.
That's great.
So I love that in films.
The filmmaker piece.
Yeah, please.
I relate to it, obviously very personally. I relate to it.
You ought
but
to.
I see reflected in how he functions with the filmmaker piece some truths that apply to me as well. The filmmaker piece, this is the artist piece. It's still very important because it's fun.
Right.
Once upon a time, there were other agendas attached to it. At this point, it's fun. And it helps expose the long division. But the deeper cut of it, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I know he'll be listening to this show, and if I am left or right or off course, he'll come back to me and we'll have a conversation about it. He can give me a little course correction. But my sense of it is that the artist, at one point, that was the experience of being the artist at the level of making the film. At this point, but transcends and includes that, the artfulness has to do with an approach and a sensibility about life. It is not simply a pursuit that happens inside of life. There is an artfulness about the way he conducts life.
I love it. And he said that in so many words. He said, I'm not trying to fix anybody at this point. I love that. And I love a film that isn't preachy, that isn't trying to... there was a point, we were both artists as well, where I thought my art was going to solve the world's problems, and that I was this great American movie or novel or whatever. And at this point, I create art because I'm compelled to do it, and I'm not trying to tell anybody if it's good or bad. I mean, I'm just...
Well, you're creating... we're creating a show. He's creating art in any number of places, including not recreating, innovating, including his sense of what home is.
Right.
It is totally off trail.
Right.
It is really generating a unique expression of his own artfulness, up to and including his sense of family and home.
I love it. I love it.
With that, I think we are out of time.
No, we got time.
Oh, fantastic.
No, he was just, I got it. You don't have to worry about that.
I thought I saw Spence waving a
He
clock.
was. It was way early. Hey, so let's track back to this, because I have more to say about this piece in particular, that the setups, I mentioned this at the end with him, that there are these setups where I think I'm doing one thing, but my sort of destiny, as it were, seemed to allow me to evolve a part of myself, unbeknownst to me, by stepping in and thinking I have this one nailed. I know what I'm doing here. Next thing you know, I go, wow, that was not what I expected, and it's off to a totally different trail. But when I get a little perspective on it, there's this tremendous gratitude for the opportunity to go down that other trail, which I personally would never have picked from my old consciousness.
In some of the more esoteric traditions,
yes,
there is language for this.
Yeah.
There is a distinction made between fantasy and Fantasia.
Yeah.
So fantasy is the assumption. It is the excitation, the attention that is paid to a dream that may or may not be realistic, or may or may not be integrated. It may be a cover for an agenda to vindicate, or an ego trip, or it may be any number of things.
Yes, but we think we know what we're doing.
But
in that
we have a
paradigm.
sense, I really want to be an artist, but my real agenda, that I may not be aware of, is I want to be validated, I want to be worshipped, I want to be acknowledged, I want to make a ton of money. What would be more, not that anything is necessarily good or bad about any of these things, but they are not aligned with the original intention. If one says, we don't have to.
All of that gets held in a fantasy, is all we're saying.
So the deeper cut of it is what is called the Fantasia. What is the light?
That's right.
What is the light in that dream that transcends the form, that is not dependent on the form, but is aligned to the form follows function, that is really an expression of the function. So you were talking earlier about an opportunity that had just come up for you that drew upon many of the skills and talents that you had developed years ago in a former life as a very successful businessman. And you thought that was behind you.
Totally.
And now many of those skills are being called upon in service of this whole new opportunity. That function is Fantasia.
And it's blowing up my fantasy. It
is
my
blowing up
fantasy
your fantasy.
is insufficient for the ride that I'm on, but the Fantasia, this piece of where, wow.
That's what's real. That is what is more real.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also what's so exciting is to allow the ride to take us.
The Fantasia is what is discovering us, even as we're discovering it. It's our self-chosen destiny.
Yeah.
And then we come upon this trail, and we are exhilarated. We think we're discovering something. There's a part of us that has laid that trail for us. We come into a relationship with ourselves. It is. It threads back to the beginning of the broadcast.
I was about to say this.
Go ahead.
It's home.
Go ahead.
So there's a way in which, again, it's one of those things we would never be able to anticipate. And then when we're there, we're like, oh, yeah, of course, because it feels like home.
Feels like home. It is. Yeah. It is that little boy in the arbor who feels a sense of peace. And now as an adult man, I understand that it is me who is fostering a relationship consciously with that little boy. Now I understand why he had peace.
Totally.
With that, I think we have come to the end of another broadcast. We thank all of our listeners for being with us. Stay tuned for Coast to Coast coming up next
on KVTA and KKZZ.
And we hope that you will join us again next week.
Thanks for listening.